Good evening, everybody. We'd like to welcome you to the City of Hermantown Planning and Zoning Commission meeting for January 17th, 2024. It's currently 7 o'clock in the evening. We'd like to start with a roll call of members this evening. Myself, Corey Colquist. Here. Valerie Roulette.
Here.
Beth Wensloff.
Here.
Buckley Simmons is not here. Dante Tomasoni is not here. And Counselor Geisler. Thank you for that. Second up is the approval of the agenda this evening. Can I get a motion for that, please?
Colquist with the motion.
Thank you for that. Can I get a second?
Wensloff with a second.
Thank you for that. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Third up this evening is the approval of the minutes from the December 19th, 2023 regular meeting. Can I get a motion on that, please?
Willett move to approve.
Thank you for that. Can I get a second?
Colquist with the second.
Thank you for that. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Number 4 this evening is public discussion. Is anybody here this evening to speak on anything that's not on this evening's agenda already? Not hearing any, we'll move on. Just for everybody's knowledge, 5B has dropped off our agenda this evening. So if you're looking to speak or talk about 5B at all this evening, it has been postponed to a later date. We're going to move on with 5A. It's an application by Arolla Architects for a commercial industrial development permit for the construction of a 3,139 square foot dental clinic and associated site improvements. The property is located at 4800 West Arrowhead Road and is located in a C commercial zoning district. Eric, what do you have for us on this one?
It's a commercial industrial development permit. This is a location at the intersection of Stebner Road and Arrowhead Road. On your screens today is a map showing in pink where this projected lot is. About a couple of years ago, the city rezoned both these 1 acre parcels to C commercial from P public. So this is actually the second go around on this particular site. Back in July of 2022, the same group had proposed a dental clinic on this site, but due to cost overruns associated with that time, the project did not go forward. Since then, that group has engaged a new architect and looking at some different building styles and building construction methods to help control the costs associated with this. So this project is still on the 1 acre site. It will have access from Arrowhead Road by a shared driveway, which would access both of those two 1 acre parcels. As I mentioned earlier, that the property is Zone C commercial. And what they're looking for this evening is construction of a 3,139 square foot dental office and a future 1,500 square foot expansion. So what you see on your screen is in the gray, that's the building that would be constructed as part of this. And just to basically the left of that is that potential 1,500 expansion pad at that point. They're proposing 23 parking spaces associated with the initial build out. And they have room for an additional 14 parking spaces associated with that expansion. Water and sanitary sewer will come from Arrowhead Road. There's existing ability to get into those two service lines that we have there by the two mains via service lines. There's proposed stormwater detention, which will be located just south of this building on that particular 1 acre property. The applicant has submitted some preliminary engineering plans to date. Those are continuing to be worked on in discussions between the city engineer and their engineer to finalize these for construction document purposes that way. The proposed building does meet or exceed any of the setbacks, so it falls within our requirements of the C zoning district. The building is approximately 10.6% lot coverage on the site. In the zoning district, we allow up to 50, so it's generally not taking up much of the site that way. The building is approximately 21 feet in height, and it's going to be a combination of basically modular and some stick-built units, with the main portion of the building being a flat roof. And then at the entry portion and the reception area, that's an entry basically element with a peaked roof associated with that and a little bit different building materials. Joe, if you want to scroll down, I think we have a couple. There we go. Thank you. Different looks at it from a building elevation standpoint. As I mentioned, the flat roof is primarily the majority of that building, but we do have this peaked roof element at the entry point that way. The dumpster enclosure will be comprised of the similar materials as you see on the building here. And as I mentioned, this had come through with the CIDP back in July 22, but due to increases in the building size, the expiration actually of that CIDP, and some changes in the overall look of that building, it's come back for basically a new look for this Planning and Zoning Commission.
Thank you very much for that, Eric. Commission members, any questions or comments so far on the first applicant here?
Eric, I guess I have the question is, looking at the location map, if I recall correctly, there were two separate lots that were for sale, and this is the one that would be further east. Is that-
Exactly. The lack of better words, the interior lot. That's correct.
Okay. And then are we concerned with the lot to the west as far as traffic flow getting in and out of that? Will that use this existing entrance, or are we not concerned with that?
Yep, there will be a shared driveway between those two buildings that way. We talked about this from the city staff standpoint and traffic flow, and they said that that was the best, rather than having two individual driveways, just have this one shared driveway.
Perfect, thank you.
Commission members, any other questions or comments so far?
Is there anything planned for that other lot or that other site at this point?
At this point, no, no.
Commission members, any other questions or comments before we ask the applicant if they need to speak?
Yeah, I just had, stormwater is gonna be, it looks like into a retention pond.
That is correct. Yes, on basically the south side of the building, there'll be a retention pond there.
Kelly, do you have anything you'd like to add to this? Thank you. Commission members, once again, any other questions or comments on 5A this evening before I open it up for a public hearing?
I was glad to see it resurrected and it looks good.
Perfect. Thank you for that. We're going to open up the floor at 7:08 for a public hearing. If anybody's here this evening to speak on 5A, this is your chance to do so. Is there anybody online, Joe? Anybody out there that'd like to speak on 5A this evening? Not hearing any, we'll close the public hearing at 7:08. Commission members, any other final questions or comments on 5A before we look for a motion? Not hearing any, I look for a motion on 5A, please.
Mr. Chair, seeing it meets and exceeds zoning requirements, I move to approve agenda item 5A as stated.
Thank you for that. Can I get a second?
Will that second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, motion passes. Thank you very much. Once again, for everybody's knowledge, 5B is no longer on the docket for this evening. We're going to move on to number 6, which is continuing business. It's an update from HKGI on the Hermantown Comprehensive Plan.
Great, thank you. So, and a couple of you that are on the planning and zoning do sit on the steering committee associated with the city's comprehensive plan update. We've been working on this for about a year now. And before us this evening is Mr. Jeff Miller of HKGI. He's been working on this since the beginning. And he's going to give us a presentation about some future land uses as well as where they've been in the process and kind of next steps moving forward.
Great, thanks, Eric. Commissioners, oh. All right. There we go. Okay, sorry about that. As Eric said, I'm Jeff Miller with HKGI. I think we met last spring, summer, I think. We're going to give you an update on the land use planning. We've done a lot of work on trying to get to a future land use map, which if you remember, your current comp plan does not have many maps, number one, but it does not have a land use map per se. So what we're gonna do tonight is give an overview and open it up for discussion about the future land use designations that would be in the plan, the future land use map, future roadways map, and then a future park and trail planning map. As far as the process, we're in number 5 of the process, but we're more than halfway done. Based on this map and the input that we get, we're pretty close to just developing a lot of the chapters as draft chapters for you to look at. So we're looking at having the plan be complete in June, July, that time period. And then the last task on here is the evaluating the existing city ordinances. That was part of the original work scope, and we'll be doing that at the end of the project as well. Excuse me. So a little background, we've been doing a lot of mapping, so it's been taking us a lot of time to get to where we're at. These are the only 2 maps I think that are in the current plan. You know, they're not GIS maps, and I've shown you maps before that we've been developing for the plan. It's a lot of them are existing conditions maps. And then just go quick, some examples of those are, you know, showing where the water resources are, the wetlands, the floodplains, places, the things that are going to prevent development in certain areas of the city over time as the city grows. We created an existing land use map, which was a lot of work. The data for that comes from the county, and it's very detailed tax classification data, and so we have to consolidate that into meaningful data. We've been working with your current zoning map. As a result of the future land use map, and then if and when you update your zoning ordinance, that zoning map will probably get updated in the near future. We tried to identify as best we could vacant and unimproved residential land. This map that I'm showing right now. Slide. Bigger. This is kind of a course look at what that land might be, and as you know, with the wetlands, we have to really look at where those are as well. We're working on parks and trails, and we met with the park board previous to this meeting to get their input on how we look at existing parks and how many people they service, or what areas of the city are serviced by current parks, and then potential future parks where there's land that could be parks versus where maybe there's areas that need parks going forward as the city grows. Roadways are mapped a couple different ways. So that's the mapping. The projections that we're using to talk about the land use map. We looked at the history of growth in Hermantown, you know, over the past, I guess, 30 years. And that's been really healthy, as you know, gotten over the 10,000 mark recently. But to get at projections, we started by looking at, you know, neighboring cities, what the region or the metro area is looking at, what's been happening at the county level. As I think you know, the county is projected to be losing population over the next 20 years. The state overall is not growing a lot. Projection wise over the next 20 years, some counties, cities are going to grow, but a lot of counties are not going to grow. And so St. Louis County is one of those counties that's going to lose population, or it's projected to at this point. So you see that drop of the county. It's just showing that the Duluth area would grow somewhat, not big numbers. And that's just the regional projection. So that's the Metropolitan and State Council. We're just showing you their numbers that they had in their plan. So for Hermantown, we took that projection into account, which is gets you to 10,672 in the next 20 years. Of a lot of growth. But you know, county's not growing and the surrounding cities are not growing a lot. You know, might be the right number, hard to know. But we did take that as being the low growth number, and we looked at scenario of a medium growth number and a high growth. And so we came up with 12,000 by 2045, seems like an aggressive number. And what that equates out to household number is 4,400 households, which would be a growth of 700 household or housing units. So, you know, that seems like healthy growth. It's not huge growth like you've been seeing. And then we looked at what kind of land would be needed to accommodate that growth. So the highest growth of, 700 households, you can see if the, you know, if the housing is built at a half-acre density, how much land it would take versus a quarter acre versus an eighth of an acre. So looking at if the minimum lot size changes from the current minimum of a half acre to a quarter or an eighth of an acre, takes less land if it's developed at smaller lot sizes. So the highest number would be if you stayed with half acre minimum, and that's where the development is happening, because even if that's the minimum, it can develop at a higher, bigger lot sizes. But the biggest number would be 350 acres is what we're estimating. So if you keep that in mind, the next step is to go into, for a future land use plan, having the designations that you would use on the map. And so that what we're proposing is 4 residential land uses: rural, suburban residential, neighborhood residential. And what we have called urban residential on this list, I don't think that's the right term, because these wouldn't be urban densities. So that will probably be changed as far as what that's called. And then a mixed use category or designation, you know, pretty logical: commercial, business, light industrial, park, open space, and then right of way. So tonight we want to focus on the residential land uses. So I think, was this in the packet, the land use designation? So you.
It went out in an update. Yep.
Yeah, so rural, you know, that would be the non-sewer western part of the city. And what we're proposing is that the maximum density would be one unit per 10 acres, which is bigger than we have today. Today you can do 5-acre lots out on the west side of the city. And we're proposing that the minimum be 10 acres. In the case that that sewer pipe would get put out to the west at some point, it's going to be much more subdividable to support the cost of that pipe if the lots out there are somewhat bigger. So when we've looked at other cities that are basically have land that's going to at some point become urban or steward land or lots, it's either 10 to 20 acres is kind of the minimums that are out there. So this could be even bigger, but when you get to that 5-acre lots, if most of the land is 5 acres, it's really hard for that then to subdivide. And so the expense of that sewer pipe per lot is really expensive. So that's why we're proposing that that limit be at 1 per 10 acres. Suburban residential, which would be most of the city, I don't know, should I pass this? I have big copies of the map. But I think that was also in your packet. So suburban residential would be most of the sewer residential land on the eastern half or 2/3 of Hermantown. And what we're proposing is that would be for single unit homes, detached, 2-unit dwellings, ADUs, connected urban services, maximum density of 4 units per acre or a minimum lot size of a 1/4 acre. So that would be a change from today where the R3's minimum lot size is a 1/2 acre. And not that, that's not requiring developers have to go to a smaller lot size, it's just enabling them to go down to a quarter acre. Rather than limiting development to a half acre. Neighborhood residential would be the next category that will be on the future land use map. That would allow for a mix of housing types, including single unit detached houses, multiple unit houses or dwellings up to 4 units, so duplexes, triplexes, quads. Courtyard cottage dwellings, which we've talked about the housing types the last time. That's the idea of smaller detached, cottages or bungalows that have small yards, but then they have a shared courtyard. Oftentimes it could be for senior households that don't want to maintain their larger yards, but they still want to have open space as part of their home. Townhomes, and then ADUs, and then connected urban services, of course. And then the last one is urban residential, which would be for multiple units, up to 4 townhomes and then apartments. Connected urban services. So, that language that we're talking about, these different kind of mixes of housing types is really being driven by one of the housing trends we talked about the last time, which was, there's more demand for housing options, including apartment communities, allowing missing middle housing, so housing types between detached houses and apartments, live work housing. And then, other trends that we talked about was modular construction, bring down the increase the affordability. Looking at lot sizes and, we're talking about going from a half to quarter acre lots. For Hermantown, a lot of the communities we're talking with are going down to much smaller lots. Where they're not trying to retain a rural character like you are. So, let's see. So what that means is the land uses that I just described, what that would mean is this is kind of the cheat sheet of, for rural, the types of housing allowed in each one. SR being suburban residential, neighborhood residential, urban residential, and then mixed use, which would be mostly in the Hermantown marketplace area when we get to the map. And then some areas along 53 as you go out to the west. And just as a reference, the current housing types allowed in your zoning districts today are on this slide. So, today, even out in it gets a little bit confusing because the current zoning, suburban is actually on the west side of the city, which I would call rural, but S1, private utilities, even out there, your current zoning allows single and 2 family dwellings. So, we're creating these new land use designations, looking at the current zoning and how that's been working in Hermantown. So that's just a reference point. So we get to the map then, and so what we're showing on the map is we did a lot of analysis of where could some of these residential designations fit into Hermantown's current housing and undeveloped areas, looking at vacant land, looking at land that is potentially subdividable. So really large lots that today a lot could be subdivided also. But in the future that they still have that potential, whether that's at a quarter acre lot or the other 2 land use designations. So what we're showing here is, the darker yellow is mostly, that's the suburban residential. So that's saying they're all on sewer's available there without extending the pipe out to the west and the southwest. So that would be at a 1/4 acre lot minimum. The orange is showing where neighborhood residential could be a fit. And so we looked at areas where there's more vacant land and it's closer to the Maple Grove Road corridor, closer to Hermantown Marketplace. Closer to open space. And so you can see there's about, there's a Keene Creek area has some of that orange. And then these other areas where we saw there was the most potential for development in the future. All of those being kind of proximate to Maple Grove Road and that main connection into the marketplace. And then as far as urban residential, so again, that would be more of the townhomes, apartments, places where that would be appropriate, that's the brown areas. So, in general, showing more housing options near Maple Grove Road, Hermantown Marketplace, Keene Creek, Highway 53, kind of those areas. And then, we are showing mixed use, mostly in the Hermantown Marketplace area, and then some places along Highway 53. So that just kind of get reactions maybe to the map, if people have questions about it. How we've gotten to this map so far, it's a draft, so we're open to.
Does the marketplace zoning go away?
So, this isn't the zoning yet, this is the land use. So the mixed use, on this map, mixed use would be where the marketplace zoning is.
Yeah.
So marketplace should be within that purple area.
Gotcha.
Or- I'm not good at that color, whatever that color is.
Many years ago, when we did the Hermantown Blandon retreat,
Yeah,
we talked about trying to get a mixed use area on Maple Grove closer to the schools and now with the Y. Just because you still have to go quite a ways for some simple things. And we were working very diligently in that because it looked like it was something that was needed and very much wanted. And that is non-existent here.
so maybe I should go to this map and talk about this a little bit. So how we tried to get at where these uses would be appropriate, not that we wouldn't be comfortable showing that, but we tried to highlight where there's vacant land. So let's see, describing this map. So the gray area on this map is the R3 zoning. So that's what's on the zoning map today for R3 zoning. So that's the residential that has sewer access. And then within that, we looked at where's vacant land. So that's the orange. And then, let's see. Yeah, that's all vacant. It includes, we broke it up by R3 and then HM, which is the Hermantown Marketplace zoning district. And then in the legend, you can see we're adding up how much land that is. And then the light orange is showing where there's larger lots that have some kind of, probably have a house on them, but they're really large. And if there was better access to them and there was more housing options allowed by the zoning and the land use plan, maybe they would be subdividable because they're pretty large. So we tried to look at where we thought development could happen. And so in that area, we didn't, that type of land wasn't identified. So not that we couldn't change, identify that for mixed use. But I think it looks like most of that land up there is probably smaller single family lots today.
There are
Yeah,
some,
Not small, I'm sorry, not small lots.
Right.
Yeah, probably. Well, there's single family lots that are
today,
large.
right?
Yeah, so I
Yeah.
don't know if there was a specific area that was it filling out that intersection, kind of support?
Trying to, right. Trying to work on that area and on Maple Grove, as you turn down Uggstead Road, where the city used to have their offices, but now it's leased out.
Mhm.
And the fields, we were talking about developing that area as, I mean, that, and we spent, I think, 3 days on just honing in on that. That's where I looked, I go, oh man, that's completely gone. But that you were there, so.
Yeah,
I know when HKGI was working with staff, like Jeff was saying, we were looking at, you know, ones that wouldn't require major assemblage to be able to create some of these things. So, if you look a little bit up at the intersection of 53 and Uggstead on the west side, you know, there's that, I think that's a 40 up there, that seems to make some good sense for mixed use development at that intersection across from the area that way. I know, originally that development was called Square 37. It's on the other side of Uggstead. That had been, at once upon the time, looked at maybe a mixed use development. But unfortunately, that didn't come to fruition. It became a single family type of community at that point.
Mhm.
so you're talking about Uggstead and Arrowhead, right? As one of them?
Eric, no, no. Maple Grove and Uggstead,
Maple Grove and Uggstead.
where we have the park and we have
Yeah.
several, there are some parcels there and some use there.
And then what was the second one? you brought up?
That was the one that, in that area, we were trying to get the most of it right there.
Okay.
So back if I interpret what you're saying, and this is just point one about that discussion, is that the idea is out front, you know, all the way, you know, would be a more, not just like a housing exec or kind of see here where it looks like a exactly what it is kind of urban residential, but maybe even some mixed use.
I-
You guys are having a discussion. Is there any examples of what mixed use meant, like versus store, what?
More of the small coffee shop, somewhere you could buy some small groceries or whatever. And a place to gather a little bit, you know, run in and get things. One of the reasons was because the city office, the old city offices was not being utilized correctly at all. And they were trying to say, okay, if we go to offices, that's one thing, but if we're renting, that changes what that is. But that parcel actually is pretty good size. And having something, that's where we kept saying, if we could use that one or across the street when that was still vacant, even though they have a building, that could have been just a really nice little small strip with even a couple little houses, I mean, apartments upstairs. It fit, it was walkable, it was everything right there. It just seemed like a really good place to be.
And that's kind of similar in a way we talked during this process about the idea of neighborhood commercial, which, I mean, if you look on the map, the only thing closest we have this tiny little red dot.
No, yeah,
And it sticks out down there because
Yeah.
you don't see it anywhere else. That, you know, that type of idea makes total sense on these major roadways. That, and the same thing under maybe a neighborhood commercial, you could still have, you know, a handful of apartment, you know, upper, lower type of things that
Right.
way.
and that's where, because there's some really nice ones on, what is that? Fourth going out.
Yeah.
And it's got the cute little, commercial down and really nice apartments above. And it looks good. It's non-invasive. The parking is light because you don't have to have it. And yet if you look where we're going, we either have to go all the way to 53 or that itty bitty little guy here. And I'm not sure if he's still open. Is
It's
he?
not even open.
He's not even open now. So we really, we've sort of limited what, as a community, I don't know very many communities that have to go this far away to get just a basic anything. And that's a long ways.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Because I think the idea of maple, or I don't turn the maple go corridor, I don't think anybody desires the marketplace for all of it. You're right, I think. Right now, we kind of talk about it, primarily with housing, or to do housing.
Mhm. I think it's important for us to not limit that. At least look at a way that it can be. I think it's needed in that area.
So, ideas are not unanimously popular.
I know.
But I do think there are.
In the right place, I get it. It's always. Yes.
So,
Yeah.
Part is that, but I think that is one really suggests that I propose, I think for me is the idea of even further ruralizing in some ways with the 10 acres, what we do out west to preserve that.
Mhm.
But also as smart as possible to folks continue to do that.
Mhm.
so what would the smallest version of that be? Would it be one corner of that intersection or?
Something, yeah. It is, doesn't have to be very big to fit 3 small businesses in with nice little studio apartments above or 1-bedroom apartments above.
Okay.
The impact isn't great.
Yeah, are there other places along Maple Grove Road that you think that?
I've been dreaming in several, but
What kind of gets into like the same thing when we do zoning, we don't like to spot zone,
So-
and maybe even from the land use, if we start identifying, and Joe touched on it, we call it the Maple Grove corridor,
Mhm.
that, maybe as part of the land use, we take a strip X number of feet in both sides of Maple Grove, and even though the majority of it's residential today,
Right.
that if it ever turned over, it could be this other type of use that way.
I think that would be very wise for us for the future.
Talk about it, coming and going, different countries before, how do you treat coming on road that
Mhm.
kind of depth. And creativity next to that. And it keeps it safe, keeps it small, but also creates some accessibility to everything like that.
Mhm.
Well, we kind of got into that with that whole Ingwald development back when that was going, yeah.
The idea that eventually that property needs to be what serves that.
Mhm.
Yeah, so I mean, what you said, Joe, I suppose that urban residential. could be mixed use.
Yeah.
I mean,
To the degree you want to fully use or partially.
right. Along.
The easy answer is, hey, turn those ground walls purple if it runs down Maple Grove and Maple Grove perfect,
Yeah,
but also. You do want some of that to be residential. You do want some of
Absolutely.
that to be mixed use, not all of it.
Duluth has the neighborhood mixed use. And it is regulating size that the commercial can be. And yet you have to have, typically you end up putting some residential in with that. And it makes a really nice feature for a lot of different uses. That I've appreciated that change in the zoning there.
What kind of percentage would that be? Like 25% business, 75% residential?
It can be up to 50-50.
Okay.
But it's, you're wanting to have it up top, so you've got to have it all to code and everything else, because it's only 2 stories.
Okay.
That's all you can do is 2 stories. You don't do the great big things. But it does make a nice, I mean, even in this area, a small laundromat there's a lot of people who have to go a long way for a laundromat. And there's a lot of homes right in this area. You know, have that and a little coffee shop and you've got a nice little place to take care of a lot of folks. You don't have things like that.
Other questions or thoughts about what the map is showing at this point?
Well, and going with what you're saying, Beth, even, I don't want to say a corner grocery store, but a specialized store like a Stokey's
Mhm.
or, you know, we had Bayside Market on Park Point for 100 years.
Right.
Place like that where you don't have to go all the way to Sam's or to Quick Trip to get a gallon of gas for the lawnmower, you know.
Since we can't have a quick trip in the middle of here, then we need something like that.
We were only talking like 2 miles, though, right?
Mhm.
From like here to Quick Trip in either direction. Right? The one out on the highway on,
From our
Sugar
house,
Maple's gotta be what, 2 miles from here?
probably.
Going south, you'd have.
But
to
we're
go out by
talking about
tractor.
families, if you're, and what I'm seeing this happening is either age bracket, either young or more senior. The type that becomes a hassle when you're having to put 3 kids in car seats to take them a long way away instead of strapping them in the stroller and you do a little jog there 3 months of the year. You know, but that kind of thing, we do miss out on some things, I think, and we're trying to be people friendly. And that's something we just haven't done very well.
I think on the south side of Maple Grove, we have the advantage, you know, particularly between Getchell and Uggstad, that we do have some fairly vacant large parcels that, you know, I think that would be an easy, you know, I could see some good, lack of better words, infill development on those, where some of those things make sense.
Mhm. Just thinking the availability for tomorrow.
Mhm.
What you're saying, does that mean Joe should put that insurance to that? That's not how. But it just creating the flexibility for other people to decide.
Right.
Versus just. Obviously, if anyone makes these. That creates the variability before the street idea. Versus.
That's all you get. Right.
Some spot.
Yeah. Mhm.
But would you dictate it to have residential in it? Mixed use doesn't mean it has to have
You
residential.
don't have to have it. That's where you can, as an investor, that's where you can utilize much better bang for the buck. Because you get the commercial and the residential.
I comprehend that side of it. I'm having a hard time wrapping my mind around that, even looking out 50, 60 years. That's just me.
And we have worked with other cities on mixed use and you don't have to require it. That's one thing. So
Mhm.
some
Right.
cities, especially more urban cities, they will require it sometimes, or they'll want to. But we've actually worked with cities where will say, the market's probably not there. I wouldn't require it.
Right.
Because it could actually be a barrier to development at some
Right.
point. So you don't have to require it. And this land use plan, you know, it's meant to be longer term than the zoning. So you say, Uggstad and Maple Grove, we want to we want to invite the potential for it. You still have to go through the zoning process and show
Sure.
what are we actually going to zone each property and deal with it there too.
Yeah, I'm obviously not against having options, that's for sure. I'm having a hard time wrapping my mind around that one. Cause it's not that far to anything. I mean, it's 2 miles to Target, 2 miles to any Quick Trip, 2 miles to Super One. I understand the walkability portion of it, but I think in order to have a viable business there, you'd have to have a significant amount of residents that are gonna be able to walk there.
Which we do right here, right in the center. We have quite a few. I mean, that's a good place.
500-600.
Doesn't take much.
Okay.
Well, I can, why don't I go through a few more slides and we can come back to this map, because this is a key thing we want to get your input on. The way we got to some of these, especially these orange areas and the brown areas on the map is we actually did concepts working with staff, workshop to figure out like, what are the restrictions here? What are the dimensions of these properties? Looked at the wetlands, road access, all that kind of stuff. And that's how we came up with those. We also have a draft map that I don't think was in your packet, but what does that mean for road access? Probably means connecting more roads, breaking down the 1 mile kind of grid that happens in a lot of places. So you can see on here we have a draft map. And we can this map, we can make this available to you, but it's showing roads that could potentially connect. So you can see down that Maple Grove, Outstead area, you see those dashed lines, those would be potential new roads. Maybe not determined if they're public or private necessarily. I would say probably public, but that's not being dictated. But it is breaking down that access to them, which would be important for a mixed use area to have. It's, it has to be easy to get there. So that's part of this too, is we're showing in those areas that we just talked about, more roads being built to make them more accessible. And so we talked about this map a little bit. This is how we got there. At this point, this preceded us getting into those concepts. We have these acres identified. We've done a little bit more analysis. This is the map showing the subdividable land where there's larger lots that could be subdivided. So, we've been doing a lot of analysis to try to figure out where are these places that have the most potential for different types of housing. But what we're trying to figure out is there enough land in the Seward area today without building a new pipe to the west? So at least over the next 20 years, is there enough land? So where we've gotten to is the current zoning districts, we came up with 900 acres of R3 land that's vacant. Now that's not all guided for the right land uses necessarily in the plan. So there's a lot of acres there. What we're wanting to focus on tonight is for the proposed future land use map that we're just looking at, we're showing for that neighborhood residential. So that's where it's, more townhomes, multi-unit housing. 171 acres is shown on that map. Oops. And then for the urban residential, which is the brown, which would allow apartments, 65 acres. So that would allow other housing types and, higher density, but it wouldn't require it. So somebody can still buy that land and put in single family lots. And then mixed use vacant, which is, the Hermantown marketplace, and then along 53, that's 168 acres. Even if that was built at the new minimum single family lot size, which is a quarter acre. 4 times 400, that'd be 1,600 units right there. So that's more than the 700 housing units that are being projected. So, the goal isn't to identify, tons and tons of land for higher density housing or anything like that. It's just identifying options where there could be development of housing options for Hermantown residents. So today, that's not possible, because I think today, if you want to build something more than single family, 2-family, you have to do it in the commercial district.
A commercial district or a planned development, yep.
So this would be a map that would say, here's where it is appropriate to do other housing types. And, you know, there's no magic number that it has to be that much orange or brown on the map, but in general, we thought those were potential areas to guide me for that. I don't know, does that make sense as far as the numbers?
Mhm.
Yeah, so that's the land use part. I also want to go to parks planning stuff with you as well, but if that makes sense, I don't know if there's other questions or thoughts about the future land use map. You know, happy to talk about that. No? All right. And talk about parks planning then next. So the way we're looking at parks planning is, today you have a master plan in 2018. We talked in more depth about this with the park board. And that looks at the parks that we have today, and then it identifies future parks, at least on the map. And as we've been talking it through, it's been identified that some of those future parks that show up on the map maybe it's really city-owned land that's undeveloped as a park. And maybe they may or may not all be great places for parks, and they may not be the best land for parks necessarily. So we're looking at that. And so the existing parks, just to simplify it, today are Key Creek Park, Stebner, Bickner, Rose Road, and then the schools parks. So this map that we're showing here is an analysis of those 5 existing parks. What's the what are the areas that are actually serviced by those? And you can do this, you know, it's up to the city to define what's a service area. So what these buffers are showing is if you say, well, everybody should be within a 1/4 mile, that's those pink areas. If it's within a 1/2 mile, and so that's crow fly, so, you know, road access might make it actually longer than that, of course, but the tan areas would say, those are within a 1/2 mile of a park. And then the purple is within a mile. So again, the goal of the comprehensive plan, the parks chapter will be to define what is Hermantown's goal for people's access to parks. Is it within a 1/2 mile, 1/4 mile, or a mile? And that's the existing parks. And then the future parks. Again, this is just using the master plan that was done about 5 years ago. There's some other land identified as potential future parks. Includes Art Olson up in the northwest, Water Tower up by 53, you know, and then these other ones. So there's 6 parks. And then we added them onto this map. You know, it starts to fill out access, especially if the decision was, you know, the goal is within 1 mile is what Hermantown's shooting for. That covers, you know, most of the Seward residential area probably. But if it's really more, if that seems too far and it really should be a 1/2 mile, then we're talking about the tan area. And then it starts to identify where there's gaps. So we talked through that with the park board. I think some of the takeaways were we should look at what kind of land is in these undeveloped parks that aren't parks today. And maybe we should do 2 layers, maybe there's community parks, and then maybe in the plan, the goal is to have neighborhood parks. Community parks, maybe the mile buffer makes sense. Because they're, you know, they're big facilities, they're playing fields. You know, they're big hiking areas or whatever. But maybe the city should look at the potential for neighborhood parks that are closer, whether that's a 1/2 mile or a 1/4 mile. And then do that same buffer, and then look at the residential areas on the same map and just see if there's areas where the city should think about trying to identify future neighborhood parks. Eric, you can tell me if I'm wrong on that, but that's kind of the conversation we had at the park board.
Yeah, it's really, and especially if we start making a move towards smaller lot sizes, that the idea of a neighborhood park gains more traction. Because right now, we're lucky, we have half acre plus lots. You don't really, people have their own park in their yard.
Mhm.
And so, but, as, if we move towards smaller lots, you don't have that luxury anymore. So start identifying some other areas that might have these gaps in this system if we go down to a quarter or a half acre.
Any thoughts, questions about that analysis? That's what we wanted to present tonight, so, in general, we're trying to get your sense of, do the residential land use designations make sense for Hermantown's future development, so, having the rural, suburban, neighborhood, and then urban for residential land uses. Do you support the direction of the future land use map to guide future residential development? Does the idea of future roadways being identified on that map make sense in the comp plan? And then do you support the direction of the future parks plan that we've done so far?
On the website, on the comments lately, have we still gotten a lot more comments on the website? Okay, yes.
But there's probably, if you would take a stab in the dark, you wouldn't be that far off and say that that's supposed to be a desire for us to develop a bit more in terms of how the map would entail. And then in terms of ability, like all things that we were talking about, that after shot we were talking about, that's the relation of that. And then the other, probably more larger, but which we expected based on this, is no development anywhere, no change. But that is.
Sure.
Is that the majority?
I wouldn't say it's majority, it's slightly larger than the things, but I would say that, to the degree which is representative of Hermantown, I'd say that's probably closer to the 50-50 split, or the lean would probably be the little more. We'd like to see it a little more. Than, no.
I bet that's changed over the last 20 years.
Yeah.
It's doing this. Yep. Yep, I can see that.
Disparaging over about it, that we have population growth, we have residents without with an expectation of like.
Yeah, so to that point, I mean, you have time to, stare at that map. I mean, like I said, there's not a magic amount of land that needs to be allowing other housing types. It's just where in general you think it would be good to, allow it. And Eric and I were talking about, even though you don't need a lot of land for it, you also want to have some flexibility, because if you say, well, we want it to happen over here, and that property owner says, I'm not ever selling my land, so it's not going to happen there then. So you want to have flexibility that there's options for that to happen over time, because obviously if all the land's private, so people make their decision.
And the dynamics will change as a smaller homes and more townhouses and more, we don't have that. The exact same thing as what I'm saying is that it's needed will really come into play when we have a whole little community of smaller townhouses and some things. All of a sudden, well, yeah, where is this? And we're going to need to have that. So just not for getting it out of here again. And anywhere that you're talking about having townhouses in smaller places, and we need to think about that in there as well.
And those, I'm gonna call them ancillary businesses that you speak of. I mean, in most suburbs and cities that you drive around in that are obviously greater than the 10,000 population of Hermantown is today. I mean, those always seem to be around controlled access intersections. A lot of that kind of stuff seems to be around, the stop sign, the stop lighted intersections. It's not out in
Mhm.
the middle of the 2 mile stretch of the road. It
No,
seems to
right.
be Always be at an
Right.
intersection. Yeah, I can see that.
And then as we get more into the actual zoning aspect of it, even even though we call it neighborhood residential and urban residential, that there's still, just like I said, ancillary, just like we went through with the business park the other day.
Right.
That we identify that, yeah, within a neighborhood residential, yeah, you can have 3,000 square foot shops, whatever. So
Mhm.
we still have some of that flexibility as well, not calling it a straight up mixed use, but within those different, traditional residential, you do have some ability
Mhm.
to have some other commercial or office type uses.
Sure, that dental office tonight could have gone somewhere else.
Exactly. Yep.
And that would be another perfect one,
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, you gotta have spots for those as the population grows. I understand that.
We have an interesting community with the wetland that we have. The roadways that we have already and the square grid. It's when I first moved here to get into real estate, it was like, wow, this is tough.
Well, and with all of the commercial,
One area.
one area, yeah,
Yep.
and the rest of the whole plot is just no businesses.
Yeah, so it might not be obvious on this map, but we have the mixed use is extends further south along Haynes than the marketplace zoning does today.
Mhm.
So that is a bigger area of mixed use potential than the current zoning map shows.
But that's right by the mall and that's where everything else is. So they're already
Yeah.
there anyway.
Yeah, so the other area is, it's only 53, but it's the one that Eric talked about earlier.
A lonely little square down there that's,
Yep.
The Hermantown General Store
yep,
corner.
exactly.
And the lumber yard.
Mhm.
Another map that I really liked, Jeff, if you want to get back to the vacant land. Is this is a big thing. Yes, with that. Because and actually that green line, that is the potential location of the next sewer.
Yeah.
And so, this was a good exercise showing, we do have a lot of land available for development without having to build that next sanitary sewer in the near future. So I think this was a very informative map for staff to see this as well. That you start adding it up and yeah, there's a lot of acreage out there that is either A vacant or B subdividable.
Mhm.
That's within our existing inventory of urban services.
Yeah, so that orange land is a lot of land. And then if you start applying, wherever you allow apartments, it doesn't take very many apartments to get to 700 units.
Absolutely.
So, it's the exercise, we don't know how that's all gonna happen, how much growth there's gonna be, but there's plenty of land to accommodate is what the takeaway was. At least for the next 20 years, it doesn't seem like that pipe should be anywhere out to the west.
At the casino H, OGI, I don't know if you'll do somewhere that. Population number. But it's also good to go on every session, that's so what it can do that. With that, the space to be higher than higher.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
because
yet
even,
so-
I'm sorry, go
so-
ahead.
So often you hear contractors say there's no place to build. You know, this is interesting because you hear that all the time. Trying to buy a lot in Hermantown, there's nothing available. Yeah, you hear that.
Well, I mean, there are not many.
No.
Lots.
It may not be available because they're not wanting to sell at this moment. But a little while longer, when the demographics gets a little bit different again, then all of a sudden, the kids come in and are able to take over the property. It's split in a heartbeat. So,
Yeah, I don't think there's a big inventory of,
I think you.
well, I
said
think
that,
we
actually.
calculated, I think there's
Hmm?
about
You
70
said that to me.
unimproved lots.
Yeah,
That
because
they're for sale, but they're.
yeah, exactly, because right now, like I said, there's really only one builder in town, and they're releasing lots slowly. And I think a lot more people want lots than that are available. What I was gonna say is, if we just keep the status quo for 20 years, we generally issue 35 new building permits, single-family permits a year. So 20 times 35, guess what? 700 right there. And that's not taking into account any sort of apartments or multifamily or stuff, which I'm getting the most calls on. I'm not getting calls on people says, I want to put up a new single family housing to bid, half acre lot development. They're like, no, I want to do eighth acre. I want to put up, apartments or twin homes, like the one that would have been before us earlier today.
Mhm.
Those are the more common things I'm hearing than the traditional single family half acre.
Yeah, I think the other thing that could be happening, because we're seeing this in another city where they do have lots that are not built on, they're platted. But if they're larger, they're more expensive, and if the market is really, a lower price point, affordable, it's not gonna happen on those lots, so, in Hermantown, if it's the half acre lot, maybe the quarter acre lot's more affordable, this other city that we're working with, they're also looking at smaller lot sizes for what they have, because they know that the houses that get built on those lots they're not affordable homes that are, they're higher end and they're taking a long time to fill them, so the market's just not there. Sounds like. Anything else you want to cover, Eric?
I think so. I know that we're gonna ask HKGI to come before city council here in the next probably 4 to 6 weeks plus. And take a lot of this information that we've, gotten today and keep working on this and bring city council up to speed on these things as well. So there's still gonna be opportunities, obviously, for public input and involvement in this as we, keep moving along. And as Jeff had mentioned too, is we reach the tail end of this, is we're gonna take a look at the zoning as well. So take these things that we've enacted in the comp plan and how do we convert that over to a zoning standpoint? So
is there going to be another meeting of the steering committee?
Yeah, I think so.
mhm. Yep, so what we could do is look at that same time as a city council and a steering committee to combine those efforts that way.
All right.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Ready?
How you feeling, Mr. Chair? Want to keep on
I'm great.
moving on?
Number 7 this evening is new business. 7A is a discussion on accessory dwelling units. Eric, what do you have for us on this one?
So the last P and Z meeting, we had a brief discussion as like a couple members of the the commission as well as staff occasionally hear comments or questions about accessory dwelling units. What's the city's appetite for those? Are they ever gonna allow them? Are they ever gonna happen? So what staff did is started looking at different communities throughout the state. Both, our neighbor, obviously Duluth, as well as some different size cities. I mean, it's easy to pick the Minneapolises and the St. Pauls, but it's like trying to find other ones like the White Bear Lakes, ones that are a little bit different sized communities, the Northfields, ones that you traditionally maybe wouldn't think of with ADUs. So, all these communities, at least the ones that I mentioned, in the 7 that we looked at, allow ADUs in some sort of fashion. And so what we derive from that is basically there's some common requirements or underlying themes associated with these. And then the question will be, is our conversation with this commission is, do some of those make sense? Where do these happen in our community? Do they not happen? Where do we go from there? So like I said, some of these common threads that we're seeing is that the ADUs are allowed in all residential zone districts. There's no minimum lot size associated with that. It's not to say we have to go down that road, but that's what we've been seeing as at least a thread of these different communities. The ADU sizes we're seeing generally anywhere from about a 300 square foot minimum up to about an 800 square foot. There's a couple outliers that went as high as almost 1,000 square feet. At that point, I mean, it's getting to be a pretty significant size structure that way. Generally, in all cases, that utilities, they have to have their own utilities and they're provided from the main living structure. Because right now, the way we look, or at least pursue, is through a lot split. And you have to have your own separate utilities. We don't allow utilities going from another building. So, under the ADU scenario, that utilities would come from the parent structure. That there's always some sort of a dedicated parking spot or spots for the ADU. That's what we're seeing. And then some of where it differed in different communities was the ownership requirements of the parent lot. Some said, no, these have to be owner occupied lots in order to have an ADU on there. And others are saying, no, it can happen in a rental property, could have another ADU on there. So essentially you'd have 2 rental properties within one parcel that way. And that's almost evenly split. Saw it both ways that way. And then some, once again, it's straight up a permitted use, and others require that, no, this is actually a license associated for the ADU. And then lastly, approval requirements. Some communities are saying it's permitted use. You go through the building, you meet the zoning requirements, you're fine. Others go as high as this needs city council approval. Maybe for us, if we go this route, you treat it like the middle ground, like we do with the CIDPs, or you think about how we started with flag lots. When we first did flag lots, it was a public hearing at P&Z and council took the action. After we got through that for a couple of years, there seemed to be a comfort level that says, no, this can just happen at the P&Z level. That there's a public hearing, people have an opportunity to express comments, interest, etc. And then P&Z makes the decision on it. So there's different levels of basically approval or oversight associated with it. So those, like I said, those are some common threads that we're seeing from the ADU standpoint. I know when myself and Josh Bergstead, we're talking about this years ago, and even a little bit with Adam Sheminsky, we're kicking around is, do we allow ADUs basically in that middle ground? Lack of better words, we have a number of lots that are half acre. We've got quite a few that are in that half acre, not 1 acre. So you can't subdivide those. So are those that missing middle that you could allow ADUs in that, basically that oddball group that you can't subdivide further? Or same thing, do we allow these at Jackson Estates, Peyton Acres? There's no zoning minimum lot requirement or lot width associated with it. So, a lot of different things. When we talked about this as staff years ago, at that point, we were using the term granny pod. And we said, hey, it makes sense for mom or dad, but what happens after they're gone? And it's going to turn into a rental more than likely. Says, do we have an issue with that from a city standpoint? That's a good question. So, like I said, those are some common themes, threads that at least staff was finding in looking at some different ADUs throughout the state, and once again, based on different sizes, communities through there.
Because we have so many on septic, private,
Mhm.
I was always under the understanding you could not get a secondary on there,
And that,
any reason. Holding tank, not a secondary.
and that's a discussion we'd have to have with St. Louis County, because
Yeah.
right now they permit well and septic for those things.
Right.
You know, I said,
I
I
mean,
think,
we just really need to be sure.
Sure.
Sure what they say, because that's even for a garage. We can't put bathroom in the garage if you're on the septic,
because the existing septic's not sized for it.
right?
Okay.
And they're saying, no, that's,
Hmm.
we didn't design at the beginning.
Sure.
If you overkilled, you could probably get away with it. But most people are not going in there building those on the oversize. They're
Sure,
always
exactly.
exact or under.
Hmm. That you would, it'd be, put the onus on the property owner to prove that this is an overbuilt system, that the mound system that, for the 3-bedroom house can really accommodate a 4-bedroom.
Right, and now they're allowing us to add to it. So that's another little possibility that can do, but we need to know that for sure.
Yeah, just like if you're gonna add on to your house with a septic, the county makes you go through that process.
Right.
Getting it approved.
Yeah.
You're adding another bedroom and toilets and things.
Eric, didn't see where any of these other cities addressed that.
Didn't dive that deep into it, to tell you the truth. And honestly, a lot of the communities we looked at, I mean, probably the exception of, I could see there being some septics in White Bear Lake and Northfield, but the other ones are, built out communities, so.
And they don't have St. Louis County.
Roughly what percentage of residences in Hermantown now is a rental?
We do not know that. We're,
Homeowner occupied home to my living. They said, I wouldn't want that.
okay, thanks, John.
I was just thinking along the lines that you said a lot of them would turn into potentially a rental. So I didn't know if we'd be flooding the market then or not. But doesn't sound like it'd be a big deal.
Exactly, yep.
Yep.
And it was kind of a split between that. Of the 7 I looked at, the 4 were, you have to be owner occupied, the other 3 says they can both be rental.
That's difficult.
Some cities, I'm wrong. Yeah, we do not, I'm not sure we want to get there. That's fine.
Yeah, I'm with you. Like 10 years ago, I wouldn't have thought about it, but I'm more open to it today.
Exactly.
I think there's a place.
Mhm.
You just have to set the parameters on it.
Yeah.
As long as they
No, it's
so you're
great.
saying no, the first one.
I wouldn't wanna.
So is the new 150 unit apartment building.
That's.
I-
That probably is, that's. Might be a little. Change the census numbers up there, with all of them.
And that's of individual homes, or that takes in apartment buildings and everything? Right.
So what is the downside to having ADUs in the city?
People don't want, if you have a smaller lot and your neighbor has your house and all of a sudden there's another small one going there, it brings down the value of the other houses. Florida is having this issue hugely. All of a sudden, everything is becoming an ADU. Even the camper that you own becomes one.
Because
But it really has changed and they are saying, whoa, no, stop. We have no control. The sewers are getting overused. Everything is getting, you can't, you don't, even 911, what's an address to have emergency to? All of a sudden it changes and it changed quickly. They didn't have the rules and now they're coming back, putting in a bunch of rules so that they can better handle this and telling people to stop. So,
Yeah, I know in Florida, because of so much damage from the hurricanes, they have like little camper trailers, VRBOing and
oh, yes.
boats and, trying to find a place to stay down there while their place is being rebuilt.
Or just a good moneymaker. So, yeah, you can see, yeah, there are things that if we don't do it that way, have it pretty good.
I look around the project. And then, what happened with it? Taking care of all that.
What would be the same for anybody's property right now? I have 18 red cars in my front yard, somebody complained, right? But it was an ancillary building and that.
So in order to keep moving forward with this discussion, who would put the parameters on that?
Well, I think it would be even more of a, and I'm kind of looking at John on this one, is the discussion with the city council a little bit as well to find out their appetite for something like this. And if there's a general consensus that, yes, this makes sense for our community, then staff would generate, just like we've gone through like the new ordinances, we would generate those parameters, that information, bring it back to this group for discussion and work those things through. And assuming it was satisfactory and received a vote of essentially not approval, but that support it, then it would go to council for action. But, they said there's a lot of questions and Mr. Geisers is talking about, big one being lot size. Are we comfortable on a half acre lot that you could have, and some of these half acre lots have big homes on them. All of a sudden you have another structure.
Right, I mean, that sounds like it would be the biggest hurdle to the whole thing is picking what lots it could go on, whether it was 1 acre to 2.5 acres, whatever, if that was your parameters, you got to be that size of
Coverage of
lot.
Lot coverage, sure.
Lot
Mhm.
coverage would be
Right.
the way, but the big houses and
Mhm.
Yeah, I think lot coverage is your answer. Because if you already have a big old honking house, there's no more room.
Yeah. It's an interesting discussion, that's for sure. And I'm like Mr. Mulder, I would have been against it 10 or 15 years ago, but I have a much greater appetite for it today. Yeah.
Your children need a home.
Well, I mean, there's all kinds of scenarios like that, you know? I mean, I know somebody that's got one in Kenwood now where their mother lives in it and she'll live there for the next 10 or 15 years. And then, like you said, it'll probably turn into a college rental after that, if they stay in that house, you know, but, yeah, I think there's a need for it. I don't think you're gonna get 500 applications in the first 2 years, you know, I think it's gonna be few and far between. Right,
Yeah.
it'd be
I hit
wonderful.
the 12,000. Yeah.
You know, I guess, I just don't think you're gonna just see the floodgates open because you allow it. You're gonna see 10 or 15 a year. It's like the flag lot thing. We were against it for so long and so adamant that we weren't gonna do it. We do it now. We get what, 5 or 6 a year and none of them seem bad.
I think it's just like the flag lot, and then Mr. Mulder said that you write the parameters pretty tight initially.
Right.
And they find out says, hey, this works, let's.
Yeah, and smaller the better, you know, 800 square feet max. It doesn't need to be bigger than that. Otherwise, put an addition on your primary home at that point,
Right.
you know?
How do you handle garages or shops? I mean, with not knowing what people, I get this is dwelling, so living quarters, correct? But I mean, shops, a person builds a big shop on their property, how do you know that they haven't?
When the building officials looked at these in the past, they will raise some questions. That sure looks like a bedroom up there. What's that being used for?
Sure. It's bound to have happened. Yeah.
My husband's garage at the house.
Right.
We get go dash all the time with it. It's crazy.
But again, you don't have to worry about that, about how some of the equipment is younger. And
Right.
Well, and that, they do make, campers without wheels, you know, like you put on a lake home, and I think that would have to be, you know, it would have to have a foundation, it would have to be a structure. not a-
New slab.
Yeah, because right now, even in our ordinance, the minimum lot size is the minimum house size is 792 square feet. Permanently affixed to a foundation, you have to have utilities, and it has to be greater than 22 feet in width.
Yeah, so, I mean, there's a good start right there.
Yeah.
Mhm. You're just building a tiny house.
Yep, but I agree with Mr. Geisler is, I don't envision these as you truck it in on the, like you said, the tiny homes that are my
Yeah,
idea.
tiny
It's
homes or
an
the-
RV is
the
what it
lake
is.
home, the park model,
Right.
campers.
Yep. Again, I think there's a need to look at it. A little further. I mean, I don't think you're gonna see, like I said, a pile of applications every year, but you're gonna get some and you're gonna know they're out there and you're gonna know they're legit and they're done right. You know? Just a thought.
That's the point of the, you know, emergency would be a big, you know, it is a concern, you know, you got a 911 number. What building do you go to, you know, if there's an emergency? I suppose somebody's out on the street waving their hands
Yeah.
when they go through.
Not
That would be a
out.
huge concern for me. If you're like between a 1 and a 2.5 acre lot or something like that, you're getting, it's one of the two buildings.
Yeah.
People are gonna be out there looking for you.
And I know, kind of getting back to that is, because you just went through this exercise on Peyton Acres of assigning house numbers or lot numbers, and we try to leave some gaps in there. So in a lot of instances, we have some wiggle room if we added something in between.
Yeah.
Sure.
It
So-
could be an A or something.
Mhm.
Any other conversations this evening on accessory dwelling units? Not hearing any, we'll move on to number 8. Communications, anything this evening, Eric?
No, there's none.
Thank you for that. Number 9, commission member reports. Myself, nothing. Corey Colquist,
No report.
Valerie Roulette, Beth Wenzloff,
No report.
Counselor Geisler.
No report.
Wow.
Yeah. My wife's gonna think I went to the bar, so.
All right, well, I look for a motion to adjourn at 8:31 PM.
Well, that moves to adjourn.
Thank you for that. Can I get a second?
Winslow second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, meeting is closed at 8:31 PM. Thank you very much.
Go recruit your friends, will you?